they have set up their own families. People tend to think that they are forgotten, but they are not. And today, we want to focus on them, especially during this pandemic that we have, which is during this pandemic that we have, which a lot of people are so concerned about the older persons. I will call them older persons according to what the United Nations have now been using. Within the African setting, we call them senior citizens, we call them elders, we call them old people. But the current expression for the older generation is actually older persons. So let me take you into a bit of what I found out on the website of United Nations. As we all know, in the African community, the older people, they're the good source for advice, very well respected for their wisdom, and usually they are custodian of family values and stories which are passed down through generations. However, as we age, health changes may actually set in, and we need to know what to do. So, certain medical diagnoses which require older person to be admitted into a care facility would actually never be considered within the African setting. And why is that? It's still due to the African mindset because we hardly take older persons into a medical care facility, which, of course, is totally different from the way our Caucasian cousins behave. So, how do older persons take care of themselves? How do we as Africans promote healthy living, taking into consideration that majority of our food is full of carbohydrates? How do older persons cope with living alone, especially when the children have left home? Older persons face community engagement at times in terms of barriers. Right now, everybody is on Zoom due to the pandemic. However, today I'm happy to say that our special guests, which include four septuagenarians, in fact, one of them will be in the octogenarian club within the next 1 month. They are very savvy. Hence the reason why they're joining us today on Zoom to share with us how they have actually been living healthily. So, without further ado, we are just going to go straight into the discussion. To help me out here to understand what geriatric medicine is all about, we have two geriatric physicians with us. The first one I'm going to start with is a consultant NHS physician and a geriatrician. He's a clinical director for COVID 19 and unscheduled care group in the Isle of Man. He obtained his certificates of specialty training, CCT, and dual accreditation in geriatrics and internal medicine in 2006. He's held consultant positions in acute medicine and geriatrics in major UK hospitals. He's a clinical director and he has been since 2014. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Ishaku Pam. Welcome, Dr. Ishaku. Are you there, Dr. Ishaku Pam?
Yes, thank you very much, Anne, for that introduction. I'm very pleased to be here, and I wish to extend my greetings to fellow panelists. I'm pleased that you have got a cross-section of older people here. And of course, I would like to say hello to the audience as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I really, I really want to ask you, um, could you tell us briefly, for those of us who are non-medical, what does geriatric medicine mean?
Right. That is a question I'm sure that a lot of the audience would be wondering about, because as a specialty, it is not as old as the other traditional specialties that most people are familiar with, neurosurgery, a lot of the organ specialties. So geriatrics is a branch of medicine
Right.
that is responsible for the care of the older person. And it's important to, first of all, define who the older person is, because
Yeah.
that is central to understanding what a geriatrician does. You will be surprised, as well as most people will be surprised, that there's actually no worldwide uniform definition as
Right.
to who is an older person. And I
Okay.
think this is useful rather than uh, something to be critical about,
Mm.
because age can be looked at in two ways conceptually.
Mm.
Chronological age, which is the sort of absolute figure from birth, when you were born, to what your age is.
Mm.
Um, the other concept is biological age.
Mm.
So if you were to define an older person purely on chronology,
Mm.
then you might get things badly wrong. You have in the introduction mentioned that we have septuagenarians here. We have someone who is very close to being 80.
Mhm.
And I think that is a very important illustration of this concept, because I would like to say that the panelists here, for instance, who are in that age group, are biologically perhaps in their 60s.
Mm.
In every way you look at it, functionally, cognitively, physically.
Mm.
And whereas you might get people in their 60s who you might see them and assess them and think, actually, biologically, they are well advanced in age and
Mm.
would fall into the category of individuals that a geriatrician should look after.
Mm.
So the definition of the older person or is actually based, can be based on chronology or based on needs, particularly in the hospital environment. So the cutoff is arbitrary, and you would find that it depends actually on the community in which a hospital is based, for instance. So I have worked in places where the cutoff is 75,
Right.
and in other places like Cambridge, where the cutoff is actually 85, because they have people who have attained that age, and a big proportion of their community,
Mm.
people are advanced and highly functional. So if the admissions in a hospital in Cambridge, for example, the Adam Brooks Hospital where I've worked, if you were to define the older person as being over the age of um, 75, then you would find that you would not have enough geriatricians to look after them. So the individuals who fell within the remit of the geriatricians in a hospital such as in Cambridge would be over the age of 85. However, if you were to go to a deprived area,
Mm.
and I've worked in certain parts of London where there is a high degree of deprivation, you would find people in their mid 60s who would very clearly fall within the sort of age group requiring the services of a geriatrician. So that's a rather long-winded explanation, but I hope what sticks in the minds of people is that age could be chronological, it could be biological, and ultimately where a person falls depends on the interplay between those two concepts as related to that particular individual.
Mm.
So that is who a geriatrician looks after.
Okay.
Um, what does a geriatrician do then? What is my job?
Mhm.
My job is to look after people who come into hospital who fall within this definition I've given you.
Right.
And we sometimes use a number of scoring systems,
Mhm.
um, recognizing the fact that the emergency department is a very busy one.
Mm.
So we do not depend on the more complex systems such as Rockwood score, which gives you an idea about the functional and mental capacity of an individual. You could use a system such as the Bournemouth score, where you just look at, say, they're over 90,
Mhm.
that individual immediately falls within the category of people I look after. Or if they're over the age of 65 and they're so dependent that they come from a care home, or if they're 75 and have certain conditions, at least two of them, which could be things like dementia or falls or incontinence, or where they have social problems and there are difficulties looking after them, to just give you an example.
Yeah.
So those are the people I look after. And apart from looking after the individual, my job involves also creating pathways through the hospital so that there's a systematic way by which all physicians, all healthcare professionals look after older people so that we're all delivering the same high quality care. And it's not variable to the extent that the kind of care an individual gets depends on who they see. So we aim to make it systematic, and we make sure that the care we deliver also is linked in a streamlined way between hospital and community, i.e. between secondary care and primary care. So I'll stop there.
Okay.
I think you've probably heard enough about what a geriatrician does. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Why do you think some people are afraid of aging? At times you hear people saying, "Oh my God, my bone, my bone kind of like aches." I do the same thing even though I'm in my 50s. So why do you think some people are scared of aging, the aging process,
Yes,
and what comes with it?
I think it's a natural human reaction to aging,
Mhm,
because the perception of aging is that with time people lose their independence,
mhm,
and that is what people fear the most.
mhm,
Um, you may all be aware of countries like Switzerland where they practice euthanasia,
mhm.
Holland as well, where people decide when they want to die and they go over to those places and have their lives terminated medically. And when those people were asked why uh,
Mhm.
they, they, they chose such options,
Right.
predominantly it wasn't the fear of disease, it wasn't pain, it
Mm.
wasn't anything to do with discomfort. It was largely because of the fear of independence,
Right.
getting to the point where you are completely dependent on others, or what is worse, being cognitively impaired to the point where you're unable to exercise your mental faculties.
Mhm.
That is what people fear.
Okay. What do you think there is a difference in the way Africans perceive um, age-related ailments as opposed to our Caucasian counterparts?
Yeah, I think the answer to that question really is it depends.
Mhm.
It depends on the African,
Right.
and it depends on the context. So an African in Africa will
Mhm.
think differently from an African in the Western world.
Right.
So there is no one size fits all answer to your question.
Right.
Um, you would have to stratify the response to that question on a number of levels.
Right.
One would be, what is the intellectual or educational attainment of the individual?
Mhm.
Secondly, what is their worldview? If their worldview is shaped by religion,
Mhm.
it is different from the worldview of an individual who has been domiciled in the UK and perhaps has moved away from religion. They would look at disease in a different way.
Right.
And also, it depends on the context of what what the state does, the frameworks for support for the older person.
Mhm.
So that shapes how an African will think about disease. If
Mhm.
it is an African in the UK, for instance, where they are surrounded by state-sponsored um, support networks and health networks, then they're more likely to engage positively
Right.
with the health services. Whereas if it is an African in Nigeria, for example,
Right.
in fact, the way they approach health might be not so different from even younger people,
Right.
because there is a resource implication for any health-seeking behavior.
Right.
There is also apprehension, because I'm sorry to say that the delivery of healthcare is not optimal in most places.
Mhm.
So the fact that people are going into a health institution creates some fear in them. So that, in a nutshell, the approach of any individual, especially an older person, depends on where they are on many levels.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much for that. You're talking about the medical facility and everything else. With regards to the pandemic right now, the older persons come under the vulnerable group, I guess. So,
Yeah.
how can they actually protect themselves during this pandemic?
So well, first of all, they have to adopt the standard precautions that are recommended for everyone.
Mhm.
That is social distancing,
Mhm.
that is hand washing in particular, and where an individual is symptomatic, i.e., the most typical things would be respiratory symptoms, that they self isolate.
Right.
But bearing in mind that the consequence of COVID-19 infection is particularly um, dangerous in certain high-risk groups, including the older person. The advice really is that older persons ought to self-isolate at home. And that has been advised right from the beginning. So that means that they should generally avoid visitors.
Mhm.
They should limit themselves really to very close first degree relatives who live with them. And such people also would have to exercise similar precautions. And in terms of activities of daily living, when it comes to exercising and so on, they should limit themselves to within the house or the garden.
Mhm.
If they need supplies, they should have trusted people of a limited number who will make those supply runs for them, deliver them, and not necessarily have to come in. So they could deliver them at the doorstep and leave. So those are they're quite stringent precautions, but they are ultimately necessary.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pam. We'll hold it right there in the interim. The next physician is someone with diverse wealth of clinical training and practice, with notable bedside manners. I'm going to ask what that actually means. Her clinical practice spans three countries: Nigeria, Kenya, and the United States. She's been the head department of internal medicine, deputy chair of the medical advisory committee, acting chair of the medical advisory committee at the National Hospital in Abuja, Nigeria. She's a fellow of the West African College of Physicians and currently chief consultant physician and geriatrician, leading the geriatrics unit of the Department of Medicine, also at the National Hospital in Abuja, that's the Federal Capital Territory of Nigeria. She is the interim assistant general for West Africa of the African Society for Aging Research and Development. She's a member of the steering group of the Stakeholders Group on Aging Africa. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Ogugua Osiogbu. Dr. Osiogbu, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you, Anne, for that introduction. And it's really a pleasure to be here with everyone. I'm particularly excited that we have a number of older persons here because they are the major stakeholders. They need to be in the driving seat for the discussions we're having today. We need to hear from them, and they let us know how we can support them in making sure that their well-being is maintained.
Thank you very much. Let me ask you the first question. Given your diverse clinical practice, which spans over 3 countries, that's Nigeria, USA, and Kenya, what differences have you experienced with care of older people, especially now that you're based in Nigeria?
Right. Thank you, Anne. As a trainee at the United States, I was in Pittsburgh, which had the second largest population of older adults. We thought the largest population was in Florida, but really we think it's the same people who move between Pittsburgh and Florida. On the medical floors, we had 80+% of our population being older adults. So it was a natural thing to actually develop an interest in geriatrics. The health literacy level would be one major difference. So in the US, you find that people are very interested in what concerns their health. They're interested in the diagnosis you've made. They go up, they ask a lot of questions. They actually make inquiries on their own. I always made a point to check up on what was new on health a day before my clinic, because you'll find an older adult who would say, oh, hey doc, this drug that I've been taking, I'm told that this and this and this is now happening. Should I continue with it? So they sort of put you on your toes on being able to always give up-to-date information on health issues. In Kenya, so between the US and Nigeria, you find Kenya in between. The other thing is the health provision or health service provision. Of course, we know in the US, we have facilities that can provide you all the interventional procedures that you require for maintaining life and sustaining life. In Kenya, it was the same, even though most of it, and I guess the same in the US, is private sector driven. So you had places like the Aga Khan health system, where you would have a huge consortium, multi-specialty clinic where all the specialists are under one roof, and a major hospital group that manages all the affairs of the hospital. So that for me was actually very positive and gave very good outcomes, because as a doctor, you didn't have to worry about the issues of staffing. There was a hospital group that managed that. Coming to Nigeria, it's really very different. First, the public health sector, which is what a lot of Nigerians rely on, could really do with a lot of improvement. We have constraints in this available services, but I must say that there's some good news. There's light at the end of the tunnel. A lot of Nigerians who have trained abroad are returning home to start providing health services, and they are able to bridge this gap. In Lagos, for instance, we have a lot of doctors who are back and providing services. 10 years ago, we did not have any available interventional cardiology facilities in the country, but today we do. So, things like that. We're able to do open heart surgery now, which we didn't do. I had to take a relative to Kenya in 2008 to get open heart surgery. So Nigeria has a lot of room for improvement. I'm glad that colleagues are returning home and being able to contribute their quota to bringing that improvement on. The Nigerian person or the general populace, like Dr. Palmer said, it's diverse. So there are those who have the exposure, they know what is best practice and would demand it, and would be that group that would behave like your American patient. And there are those who do not have that information. Their health literacy is really low. They are dependent on you to make all the decisions because you are the one, you're the specialist. So it's a diverse group.
Okay. My next question is, from a cultural perspective, what are the challenges faced when you have diagnosed the condition which requires the older person to be placed in a special medical facility? How receptive do you think Africans are to this type of diagnosis?
Right. So one issue that will come up is the fact that our older adults have a construct on aging.
Mhm.
So this is a country where we feel you're 60, 65, you're a grandfather or grandmother, you've made significant achievement. Also because our life expectancy isn't that high. So if one died at 65 with all of those accomplishments, then so if I had a 70-year-old that I needed to admit for, say, a pneumonia with sepsis, again, the acceptance of that would depend on what family I'm dealing with. So there are those who just feel, oh yes, we need mama to get better, and whatever it takes, let's do it. The other group would say, well, isn't there anything you could give for her to be taken care of at home? And usually it's the economic status, it's the funding, because if you're dealing with a family that does not have that much, it means their funds are being, there's a competition between what they can do with their funds.
Yeah.
And this older mother herself or grandmother is willing to say, you know what, don't spend money on me. Let's save this money and use it on my grandchildren, or, so that construct of aging and the fact that if you're old, things would always go wrong. But we need to keep that campaign going, that aging in of itself is not a disease, it's a big risk factor for disease conditions, but that older adults also have a right for medical care. So, with that campaign and the education of family members, we get them to realize that there is a need. If we admit this grandmother of yours or this mother of yours for pneumonia, it will be a shorter duration of time for her to be well again and back to her functional state. The other thing that I tend to get resistance with is when you have to recommend surgical procedures. So an older woman who has bilateral knee osteoarthritis that is disabling, she can no more walk on her own, she's having to be wheeled around. But with knee replacement, she can become independent living again. But you find family members who say, oh, you know what, no, mama is old, it's fine. She doesn't have to go through surgery. So because she's dependent on her family members, defers to them. So she's denied the autonomy of being able to make that decision on her own. If she were someone who had the means and did not have to depend on her family, or that we had a system in place where the state would pay for her services, she would make her decision and would be able to get to be independent living again and not be that dependent. So these are the sort of the issues that come up when I'm having to interface with older adults and their family members.
Yeah. Another aspect I'm just trying to focus on is how do we renew our mindset with regards to care homes, for instance. I mean, we heard from Dr. Pam, he was talking about it depends on the type of African who's actually resident in places like UK, advanced nation. So the way they will look at it, because say, for example, the older person is on his or her own, all the children have left home, of course, they've set up their own families, they're probably living abroad, and that person is on their own. Say, for example, they have a medical condition like dementia, and you think, well, the best thing to do is to actually admit that person into a care home. Majority of Africans will say, no, that's totally un-African. Do you get things like that?
Absolutely. I mean, I've made presentations even to fellow clinicians and talked about the fact that as we age, aging comes with a lot of challenges, non-communicable disease, increment in the proportion of non-communicable diseases, and expectedly disabilities. So one of the complications we'll get also will be things like dementia.
Right.
So we need to start thinking about homes to take care of such people. Right now, a lot of such individuals are with their family members, and sometimes they undergo some kind of neglect. I'll give you an instance. This older woman is left at home alone because the young girl who has to look after her goes to school, so gets back home about 2 before anybody's back home. She could do better in a facility where people are trained to look after her, and the family does not have to bear that burden. But the issue is funding. A few homes that are available are quite pricey. I guess just because this is a new venture, it's capital intensive, so of course clients have to pay a lot more. But if we actually had a system where there was health insurance and coverage for such services, many more would actually demand the service. But right now, I guess it's a mixture of factors. One is, we take care of our own, but what is the
I think we're having problems with Dr. Osiobu's connection there. Anyway, let's move sharpish to hearing from special guests for this program. I'll start off with the first septuagenarian. She's actually the first microbiologist from the University of Ife, Nigeria. She obtained MSc in Food Science and Nutrition from the prestigious University of Reading in England. For 35 years, she served the federal government of Nigeria as a research officer in the Federal Institute of Industrial Research. She also served as head of food in various categories at the Food and Drugs Administration, which is now known as the National Agency for Food and Drugs Administration and Control, popularly known as NAFDAC. She was the chairman of the Nigeria Codex Alimentarius Commission for Nigerian Food Standards, a member of the committee that drafted the national policy on food safety in Nigeria. She is the first female national president of a professional body in Nigeria, that's the Institute of Food Science and Technology. She has diverse hobbies. In church, she served in various committees, and she's been doing that for about 40 years, and she's still serving. In the social world, as she says, she was an executive member of the International Women's Society. She's very proud to be an old girl of Queen's College, the 1960 to 1964 set. She says, I'm a mini farmer and personally plant my organic vegetables, fruits, tubers, as well as breeding snails. She loves to dance and still thinking of setting up a dancing club for the older persons. She loves to socialize. Please join me in welcoming Mrs. Dolapo Coker. Good evening, Mrs. Coker.
Hi, Fumi. Good evening. Thank you for bringing me on.
Thanks for being here. You have a very active life. What are the most important lessons you feel you have learned over the years?
Well, some of the important lessons I've learned in life is to keep active. Mm-hmm. Just keep on moving.
Okay.
Never do indulge yourself in self-pity. I think that is a thing that can actually pull anybody down. True. If you start thinking that, I need to be pitied for this or that, then you should avoid as much as possible to depend on other human beings. What I mean by depend is like financially depend on people. Try and avoid it. Then one thing you can hold on to in life that I've learned is to maintain a very high integrity. It will give you super confidence in yourself. And lastly, learn to lean on God, because most things are not your doing, but God's own doing.
Good.
Yes, that's what I think are the lessons I've learned in life.
Thank you very much for that. What's the secret to your youthful looks? Can you hear me, Mrs. Dolapo Coker?
Yes, it's breaking. I can hardly hear you.
Okay. What's the secret to your youthful looks?
Yeah. It is, when we get to this stage of life, I call it the maintenance age.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're maintaining an old car, so you've got to put in a little concern. So I would say that as a nutritionist, good.
Oh, well, the screen is freezing there.
Nutrition, if you eat the foods, then every other thing will take the back seat. You will have good health.
Yeah.
Yes. You want to say something?
Yes. How have you been coping during this pandemic period?
Oh, I've got my gate locked. So I live inside my compound, my garden. And I learned to eat as much organic food as possible.
Okay.
Like I told you, I am more or less a farmer within my garden. I plant my vegetables. I plant my fruits. Like people talk a lot about ewedu, which I think is called jute or something in the US. I have in my garden organic ewedu. I have shoko. I have okra. Then I have trees of orange, tangerine, mangoes, pineapples. So I've got everything within my closed gate. And I sent people out. I actually phoned a lady in the neighborhood to get me some fish in the neighborhood and things like that. And so I really am avoiding going out and getting contaminated or whatever. Then I drink a lot of water. I prefer water to anything bottled. And one thing I've learned that probably keeps me looking good at my age is that I eat everything but in moderation. You must learn to live with moderation. It's not like you have your favorite food and therefore you eat it 2-3 times a day or every day of your life. No, you must learn to live with moderation. I also have a snail, whatever they call it, snailery. And I love eating snails. I also eat meat, but not all the time. I choose what I eat close to organic. And I see no reason, if you can maintain moderation with good food, then that is primary health care. So you just keep on moving on. That's it for me.
Good for you, Mrs. Coker. My last question here is, you've been talking about this dance class. Where would you like to have the dance class?
I would like to have the dance club in my house, right inside my house.
Everything seems
I just have a belief that there are a couple of, yes, I have a belief that there are a couple of, what do you call them? Opens, yes, in the neighborhood who don't know what to do with themselves. And I think exercising, there's nothing as good as dancing as a good exercise.
Okay.
I love to dance. In my room, in front of my mirror, I dance every day. So I still believe that if I look around, maybe I will find some people like me who will love to come together. It's only the pandemic that is actually slowing me down, because you really don't know who is who. But I'm still looking forward to setting up a dancing club in my house.
Who knows? Somebody is probably listening here and they're a member of one of the clubs in Nigeria. They could actually assist you there. We don't know. Let's see what happens. Thank you so much, Mrs. Coker. Our next panelist is somebody who studied medicine at St. George's Hospital Medical School, London University. He's a fellow of the Royal College of Obstetrician and Gynecologists, consultant obstetrician and gynecologist, and a lead clinician for gynecological cancer for East Sussex Healthcare Trust from 2000 until retirement in 2012. He currently works post-retirement as part-time consultant obstetrician and gynecologist with Brighton and Sussex University Hospitals Trust. Also works collaboratively with two healthcare providers in Nigeria. His hobbies include playing tennis and squash. He's currently learning to speak Spanish. Welcome, Dr. Kule Shoyemi. Can you hear me, Dr. Kule Shoyemi?
Are you able to hear
Yes,
me
we
now?
can hear you now. Yes, welcome.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you very much. I was trying to say hello to you in Spanish. Hola.
Hola. Do I?
Hola means hello.
Okay.
Hello.
Okay.
¿Cómo está usted? That means how are you?
Okay. What do I say?
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Okay.
What you say in response is you say hola, and you say when I say ¿Cómo está usted? You say muy bien, which means very well. Muy bien.
Hola.
So
Muy bien. Is that okay?
very good, very good.
Now let's talk.
Wise. Bien, bien.
How
You've started, you see.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. How have
Thank
you
you
been?
very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to come and be here. Thank you.
How have you been coping with aging gracefully?
Well, yes, I like that word gracefully. So that's one aspect. I think I have been very, very blessed because my next birthday, I don't mind saying, you should not ask a lady's age, but I'm quite happy to say that my next one will be 74. But I think I've done very well in that I have always been very active.
Right.
I have always been very active. Physically active. I played a lot of sports as a young person. I actually came to school in England. My father sent me to school here in England. So I went to secondary school. And as you probably know, sport is a very important part of life, of school life. And so I played a lot, and maybe it's me, but I've kept up with that. And having kept up with being physically active, I have found that it has really served me extremely well, to the extent that right now I still play an awful lot of, sports. I play a lot of tennis when I can outside. Otherwise, I play squash.
Okay. Good. What made you return to Obs and Gynae after retirement?
Yes, when I retired, it was almost like a knee jerk because I was very, very busy. As you have said, I was the lead consultant for gynecological cancer for East Sussex, and I was based in Eastbourne. And the demography of Eastbourne was that there were lots of elderly people, and so female cancer was, was very prevalent there. And as my two medical colleagues will know, cancer was one of the areas that was made by law to be an area where the British government decided that this had to take priority. So a lot of things had to be done. For instance, if a patient is suspected of having cancer, I, as a lead consultant, have to make sure that that patient is seen in time. It was staged. Eventually, you have to see the patient within 2 weeks. And if it is confirmed that she does have cancer, you have to operate on them within 31 days. And the operation had to be done by me as a lead, gynecological cancer surgeon. So you can imagine how very busy I was. So when I got to the age of retirement, I thought, well, I needed to stop here and take a rain check. And having stopped suddenly like that for a couple of years, in fact, I wasn't going to stop and do nothing because I knew that for me, it was supposed to be a change. And the change was going to be for me to go back to Nigeria. I had kept on going back to Nigeria. I did actually work at the Lagos University Teaching Hospital. I also worked at the University College Hospital. So I intended to take my skills back to offer some service to where God put me. That's Nigeria. So that was the intention when I retired from East Sussex. But one of the things I wanted to make sure was that I had independence. I think we heard Dr. Pam in his very informative and excellent exposition say that one of the things that the elderly did not like was not being independent. And also Mrs. Dolapo Koka also did talk about that included financial independence. So I needed to make sure that I had both when I went to Nigeria. So I invested a lot in trying to get myself to this situation so that I could have my independence, not just physical independence, but financial independence. Unfortunately, as things do sometimes happen, it didn't go very well. That was one reason why I went back. So financial. The second reason was I found that after a while, having retired from what was a fairly structured way of life, I got up, I went to work, I saw my patients, I had meeting, we had handover, I ran my clinics, I operated on cancer patients, once or twice a week. It was very structured. Now I had stopped and I found that the structure was no longer there. And the offshot of that was that I found that I was, not as sharp as I always like to be. The sharpness was going slowly. Some slight cognitive decline, and I did not like this at all. So that was the second reason why I thought, well, maybe I still need to have a little bit of structure and gradually move from a situation where my life was highly structured to where I will now, have a better balance.
So what's your outlook towards life?
My outlook is, it is very interesting. It is one, to accept the situation, to accept that I am getting older. As Dr. Pam has said, you can have a situation where you have, when you're defining this process of getting older, this process of aging, You have the chronological age, you have the biological or functional age, okay? And obviously outlook will change as one goes through from being young to middle age to older. Your priorities start to change, you know. You are moving, whatever be the case, whether you're talking about functionality or, you know, chronology, you are inexorably moving towards, you know, the end of your time on this planet. So you do have to start thinking about, you know, where you're going, what is it going to be about? And so the outlook has to be, one, you reflect on the life you've led. You reflect on why you are where you are now. And you reflect on what you should now be doing between now and when the curtain comes down.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. Yes, I need to change my outlook towards life as well. I need to learn a lot of things from the way where I am now to where you are.
Yeah.
I'm sure the same thing
Yeah.
goes for everyone listening to you, at least younger than you. Well, our next panelist is a gentleman as well. He studied electronics and telecommunications engineering for a first degree at University of London. He worked as an engineer in the Western Nigeria TV and Nigerian Broadcasting Corporation. He diversified into medical physics as research assistant at Hammersmith Hospital, London. Then he worked as a research officer in cytogenetics at the Medical Research Council, Edinburgh, in Scotland. He returned to Nigeria in 1973 and worked for IBM, the computer company. He went into private business in 1981, providing technical and scientific services, a licensed airplane pilot, and also a certificated glider pilot. He is currently the High Chief Sashere of Akure, which is a place in Ondo State in Nigeria. He's a member of the Traditional Council of the Kingdom and of the Oba in Council in Akure. Please join me in welcoming Chief Dr. Richard Oluedo.
Good evening. Thank you very much.
Good evening, sir. Now, I have a few questions for you. What do you
Please
do?
go ahead.
What do you do to maintain a healthy living? By the way, can I just say, he is the gentleman that is going into the octogenarian club next month. So, we wish you well, sir.
Thank you very much.
What do you do to maintain a healthy living?
By living healthily,
Yes. How?
I do not overstress myself. I still stay within the circle of friends, both age mates and younger ones. I've always been quite adventurous, I still am. And like Mrs. Coker said earlier, I do not wallow in self-pity. The age is creeping on, that is correct, but I don't see it as the approach of death. I enjoy my life as I've always done in the last so many years. That's my simple approach to it, and I think it's working.
Okay, my next question to you is, you have a pilot's license. Do you still fly a plane?
At 80, you are not likely going to have anybody give this aeroplane to you to fly. No, I've stopped flying. My pilot's license, I've stopped flying, but it does not mean I cannot fly.
Right.
Learning to fly an aeroplane is like learning to ride a bicycle. Once you know it, you never forget it.
Okay.
So, but there's so many regulations in aviation. So I don't think nobody in his right mind will reissue me a pilot's license now. So no, I've stopped flying.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, as a traditional chief, would you accept medical advice on a health condition or prefer to use herbal remedies or probably a combination?
Well, I've been listening to various discussions earlier, and I think there's a disconnect from some of us who have been exposed to Western medicine
Right.
using the wrong yardstick to measure the needs of the wide majority of the people. As a traditional chief, my interest cannot rest only in me alone, because I have people around me all the time. I have to consider their welfare. Orthodox medicine, Western medicine does help. I mean, I would go to a doctor for what I would expect as an accurate diagnosis. At the same time, I was brought up as a baby, drinking the concoction they used to call agbo, which itself was an anti-malarial concoction. So it's still been in use. So I would say I would not give one for the other. But having been a medical scientist myself, there's no way I would do anything outside the orthodox medical diagnostics.
Right. Okay.
In other words, I would do both.
Okay, good. What's your opinion of a care facility for the older person with special needs?
Well, I've again had the discussion that had been going on. I think in a lot of cases, when I listen to discussions like this, I think we tend to use the wrong yardstick to measure. I like to look at Asia, India, China. How do they look after their old people? Not the overdeveloped Western civilization. Our systems seem to be community-based.
I think it's frozen there a little bit. I think it's
In
frozen.
the past,
Okay.
yes, our system is community-based. I would hate to see my children matching me to a care home because they are fed up of the typical old age syndrome. I don't think I've gone to that stage yet, but we are really community-based, and I think we should not move away from that too quickly. The system as we have on the ground, which is subject to a lot of criticism all the time, the resources are really not there. If we have to be fair to ourselves, the money to provide the resources is not there. The personnel to do it is not there.
Right.
So if we leapfrog to the dream world of care home and that, I think we'll be not doing the right thing. That's my view. Are you still hearing me?
Yes, now we can hear you. Yes, indeed. Can I ask another question here? What would you say you now know about living a happy and successful life that you didn't know when you were in your 40s or 50s?
I really don't think I'll do anything different. I mean, I had an ambition where, like any other young man who went to school, you want to get on in life and you get on with it.
Right.
I came back from abroad in 1973, and I've been traveling in and out, but literally I've stayed back since 1973. I've seen it all come before me. So, and the things in this part of the world are not easily predictable.
Right.
So as they come, you meet it head on, and that's it. So there's no prescription. I won't give anybody a prescription. The goalpost shifts so much in this part that I really couldn't give an advice to one how you should approach it. But be yourself, be prepared to work hard, and for God's sake, have some degree of integrity in you. It never fails.
Oh, fantastic advice. Thank you so much, sir. Well, we move on to the last but not the least of the septuagenarians. This person is a veteran Nigerian actress, a journalist, television and radio presenter. She was the first pioneer editor of Africa Women's Magazine in the 1970s. This was a magazine for women, for Africans in the diaspora. She's an educationist, a counselor, and a life coach. Her acting debut was in December 1966 in the premiere of Wale Soyinka's The Lion and the Jewel. Whilst in England, she appeared at both the Dublin and Edinburgh International Festivals. And in 1973, she was in Peter Nick Hall's The National Health and played a lead role in Yemi Ajibade's Parcel Post at the Royal Court Theatre. On her return to Nigeria in 1976, she featured in several notable Nigerian films, including Tinsel, the award-winning Nigerian soap opera. She also featured in other notable movies such as Oloibiri, Dazzling Mirage, and Madam President. She's a fellow of the Society of the Nigerian Theatre Arts and the fellow of the University of the Third Age. She received the National Award of Officer of the Order of the Niger from Chief Olusegun Obasanjo, the former president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. However, this individual will forever be remembered for the classic television series in 1979 by Laolu Oguniyi's Winks Against Myself. Please join me in welcoming the actress Mrs. Taiwo Ajayi Lycett, OON. Good evening, ma'am. Welcome.
Good evening. Good evening. And what a magnificent gathering.
Thank you, ma'am. I have your
I'm
questions.
so glad to join in.
Thank you. I have a few questions for you here, ma'am. You became an actress during the time that, as Africans, your choice of profession would have been frowned upon. What made you go into acting?
What did I? Sorry, I missed that.
What made you go into acting, ma? During the time that acting would have been frowned upon, given the African mindset.
Acting chose me. I had no intention at all of being an actor. I am what I call an accidental actor. I don't like the actress, this gender business of actor, actresses. A doctor is a doctor, not a female doctor. A doctor is just a doctor. An actor is an actor. So, but people think it's being grand. We're calling oneself an actor. Anyway, I was chosen to be an actor. I didn't know that I didn't have any yearnings or whatever it is to be an actor at all. In fact, I wanted to be a lawyer.
Right.
And I had a friend who was an actor, and I went to see that person in the theater. And I was approached by the director who wondered whether I was an actor. I was, in fact, then a civil servant in England.
Right.
And so I thought I'll take my holiday and join. That's how I became an actor. Acting chose me.
Okay. I have another question here for you. What would you say are the major values or principles that you live by?
How do I feel that? Sorry.
I'm just going to mute everybody because we seem to be hearing some background noises here.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm going to unmute you now so that we can hear you. Mrs. Lycett, we are going to unmute you now.
Yes.
I'm going to ask the
I
question
said,
again, please, Ma. The question I asked you was that what would you say are the major values or principles that you live by?
Consistency, principle,
Right.
integrity. That people must be able to reliability. People have to rely on you. People must know where you stand. Let your yes be your yes and your no, and be consistent and be decent and have a great deal of integrity so that people know where they are with you. I live by that. And discipline, of course.
Thank you. What's your perception of an infirmed older person taken to a care facility because the children are no longer at home?
Well, nowadays everybody is working.
Yes.
So when you have an infirm person, nobody can take care of them. I think this is an idea that we ought to embrace in Nigeria. I know we have one or two institutions like that, but I think we have to do a lot to help people in that sense. But I believe that we can't look after our old by ourselves, actually. It's tough. And I don't think we even have a choice because we don't have the institution to look after our old people. So we have to look after them. It is also very good that the old people look after them, that our own children, our family look after them. That can be a bad thing. It is a burden on the family, I agree. But you don't have a choice in our situation. We're talking about the West, where they have institutions to take care of their young, their youth, and then they're old. We don't have these institutions. And therefore, we have to carry on until all these, your doctors, our geriatric experts, and whatever, you should all come home and establish these things so that people who have to work can go out to work. And then we have institutions to look after our old. Because if we were able to do that, then we won't have the tragedy of people believing that they're old people who may have dementia, believe that they're witches.
Yeah.
Unless we have institutions like that, we're still encouraging this superstition and backwardness, which believes that any mental illness is peculiar. Anybody can be ill mentally. Carl Jung said that, give me a sane man and I'll cure him. So who is well? So we really have to do something about Gustav Jung. I'm talking about those of you who are doctors, says that everybody is ill in one form or another. It's all relative. And as we get older, our cognitive abilities start waning. Now, we have double whammy, where your own family think you are a witch. They think that they should stone you or just make you invisible and put you in a corner. We have to do something about that. That's why I was interested in this, that we might appeal to our people who are outside, where we're looking at the ideal and saying what's wrong with home. We actually have the personnel, we have the brains, we have the competence, we have the training of our people to do that. But all of you are abroad. We need critical mass here, back at home, to do all these things that we think we're missing or are wrong with our society. Nothing is wrong with our society except the people who can really turn things around are abroad, they're away. They're away in the second wave of what I call the slavery of brain drain.
Exactly.
So I don't want to offend anybody, but that's how I see it. I think we should all come home and build our own systems and institutions, because that's what we're doing for them abroad. Look at our fine men and women who've been giving service to other societies, which we desperately need at home.
Yes.
And I am appealing that, the next wave, post-COVID, we will start thinking about what we do to turn Africa around, because we can't do it. There's nothing wrong with Africa, except all our good men are away. And the people who are here, as I said, for lack of critical mass, cannot actually do anything.
Hmm.
So that's what I have to say about that.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Lycett. You won my heart there because I'm for brain gain. All this brain drain of resources to the Western nations really, really hurts me because we have a lot of Africans doing so well in advanced nations. So we must build our own nation ourselves. And I also like the fact that you mentioned about dementia. We see it on various social media platforms where they believe that somebody is a witch or she's confessing. Meanwhile,
Yeah.
it's due to mental health issues, or maybe it could just be loneliness, So I'm sure we'll be talking. We'll, after this discussion, we'll be doing other works, with people like Dr. Pam and Dr. Osiobu, that
Yeah.
not everybody is going mad. And I love that quotation. I must come back to you, Ma, that who is not sick or something along those lines. So,
Gustav Jung said, give me a sane man and I'll cure him for you.
fantastic.
So
That is an actress. I have another question for you. The last one in the interim. How do you stay healthy and still look young?
I live, I breathe. And it's not as simple as that. The doctors will tell you, without breath, we're dead. So I do everything possible to breathe, to be active, to eat well, to exercise. I do yoga, I meditate. I try to establish the unity of mind and body. And you do that, we will all die.
Mhm.
The minute we're born, we're dead, if you see what I mean. We're dying. So until the time comes, it's mandatory that we do our own bits to keep well and active. So I do exercises. And as Mama said, Mrs. Coker said, anybody who knows me well enough knows that I'm a kokoro. I'm a dancer. I dance a great deal. I dance every day. I do my yoga. I do my walking. I try to do my 10,000 steps a day. Then I can at least 3 times a week. But I try to do that every day. And I walk up and down my staircase about 20 flights, 20 or whatever. I do 10 of that.
Wow.
Get the heart going, get circulation moving, and then, of course, stay current with what's going on in the world. There's not such a thing as growing old. No, we age, yes, but age is in the mind. When you start saying to yourself you are old, then you're preparing your own bed, you're preparing your own cortege. But you just keep living until you die.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I think is my responsibility. And I do everything possible. For instance, don't eat as an older person, don't eat any heavy food after 8 o'clock. You keep the digestive system nice and happy. Am I right, Dr. Pam? You must not overload the digestive system. So these are the little things that I do. That's all.
Fantastic,
Yes.
fantastic tips. Fantastic.
Yes.
I tell you,
and something I was going to say, I think it's bankruptcy of the highest order for somebody who is getting older to still be worrying about looking like, what is it? If you're 60, you want to look like 30. I think it's idle thinking myself. That's
Right.
dementia starting very early, as far as I'm concerned. I think you should enjoy every threshold that you reach in life.
That's right. Mrs. Lycett, you love dancing. And then we have Mrs. Coker. So this is it. A group is already forming. And who knows? We have Chief Edo there. He will probably bring all his dancers from Ondo State. And then we have a collaboration. We have a dance club there. And Dr. Shemi, once in a while that you're in Nigeria, part of your capacity building of the nation is also having a collaboration with your older persons here that you met on the discussion program. How fantastic can that be? We are really learning and looking forward to all this. Thank you so much. Now we are
Thank
moving
you.
on to our last panelist. Of course, he doesn't belong to this group of vibrant septuagenarians. We're wondering, a lot of people are saying majority of the older persons are returning to the church. They are going back to the mosques. They are renewing their faith. And we're thinking, why? Maybe they want to get closer to the maker? No, but the thing is, they want to be useful to the community. And do we give them that opportunity? What do we have to offer them? Say a church. Is it part of their responsibility? Is it part of the church's responsibility, as they call it in the corporate world, corporate social responsibility? Do they have any initiatives in place for them? So we're going to speak to this gentleman here. He's a chartered accountant and the managing partner of an accounting firm called SIAO. These are initials of the partners. The accounting firm is actually based in Lagos, Nigeria. He is also the senior pastor of Trinity House, a non-denominational church with headquarters in Lagos, Nigeria. He is a writer and totally committed to improving lives and a better environment for people and nations. He is fondly called Pastor P.I. Welcome, Pastor Itua Igodalo.
Hi, how you doing? Thank you very much for inviting me here, Fumi. Thanks a lot.
You're most welcome. I have some questions for you here. As I
Okay.
said earlier, there is an increase in older people becoming more religious than ever, attending services in church or their local mosques. As a faith leader, what is the provision for them in your church?
Oh, we have a lot of provision for the elderly. So in fact, we don't really consider age in my particular church. Just come to the church and find your space and see how you can be useful in the church and get active in the church. So as soon as you come to church, you settle down, you think you're happy in what we're doing, then we begin to find out what your interest is among the various things that we offer in terms of service and community work in church, and also in terms of spiritual development in church. And then we try to find you something that suits your person, your personality, your time, and your energy. And we continue like that. So we have quite a lot of people who are above 80 in our church. And we like to think that most of them are happy. And we try to also get engagements that would really, really excite them. So we have a special unit that actually tries to look after them, visit them at home, and create occasions that they will be very, very happy to fit in. And some of them are extremely good dancers also. So we get them dancing all over the place and making sure that everybody's happy. That is the essence of running a good gathering of people, be it in the church or be it in the mosque or wherever. My job as a pastor is to cater to the physical and spiritual needs of our congregants.
Good. Would you say that as part of a church's social responsibility, there should be specific initiatives targeted at the older people?
Oh, definitely. But as I said, not just the older people, every category of persons. So in our church in particular, we try to create an environment for every category of persons. So we have a section, even though it's a largely English-speaking church, for vernacular and French speakers. We have a section for the deaf. We have quite a few of them in the church. The blind can hear, so there's no special section for them. But we also have a department that caters to their needs. And of course, we have a department that does a lot of work with elderly people. We have every quarter an outreach for them where they do manicure, pedicure exercises, dance, and so on and so forth. Larry Williams, one of the most popular actors in Nigeria, is a member of our church, and we've created an environment for him to produce his plays once in a while so that he's happy and so on and so forth. We've done that about twice. One was quite successful, one not as successful, but that's okay. We won't stop trying. And one of the things we're trying to do, and Fumi, you know that, is to start a club where elderly people can go to from time to time, especially those who are still staying at home with their children or in their own personal homes. It was one of the dreams of your mom, who was one of the elderly people that I used to look after. We're very, very close. And she called me one day and said, what are we doing about providing an environment where elderly people can wake up in the morning, have somewhere to go to, exercise, have lunch, play a game, do some massage, probably listen to a lecture or the other, maybe even have a lawyer come through that can advise them, play with their friends while the children have gone out or the grandchildren are too busy, and then go back home thereafter, you know. So we started this issue of having an elders club where the environment is not too fast-paced and convenient for them, and a lot of their friends can come. They can do exercises, they can read the newspaper, they can chit-chat, they can have a light lunch, and they can even do business there if they want to have a little office or something where they attend to this and that. And then they have a full day of activity. And I think it's important that any serious society, any serious environment, as it sets up a creche for the babies, must also set up a gym for the active and also set up an environment for the not so active so that everybody's needs are met and as best as possible, happy. You can't satisfy everybody, but at least you can.
Hello.
I don't know if you lost me or if I lost you.
All right. Okay, we can hear you now. It's so important that you should mention that. This program was actually going to take place last year at one of the prestigious clubs in Nigeria. Strangely enough, I couldn't due to logistical reasons. And as I was planning this program, I spoke with one of the elders there. And the gentleman said to me, I said, sir, how are you coping? Because he practically lives in this club. And he said, would you believe the other time when I tried to sneak into the club? They had these huge chains on the gates. I said, why? I mean, during this pandemic period, you know, nobody is going out and everybody's meant to be staying indoors. He said, you don't want to know how people are so attached to the club that they just want to be there. And they had these huge chains, you know, tied around it. So I think people should realize that the older persons in our community are important as well. They need to have places to go to, not just sitting down at home. I could remember when I was even having a discussion with Mrs. Lyson. She said, oh, it would appear that we've been forgotten. No, not at all. In the African culture, we defer to them, but they're not only meant to be heard, they're also meant to be seen because everybody is aging. We will get to the age as well, and we want it to be treated nicely. We want to have places to go for walks, go to the theater. Some people still go to the theater. You know, like in England here, you get some, you know, the local authority here provides buses for them. Maybe this is something that we can take to the next level by reaching out to the policymakers in the respective states in Nigeria and in other parts of Africa that look, this particular group of people is giving them quality of life as well. Don't you agree with me, Pastor Itwa?
Absolutely, and I said that we are really actively working towards that to create an environment. Also, a lady, Miss Johnson, has actually worked on starting a little city, as it were, that is elderly friendly. You know, walkways, pathways, where the elderly can live in peace and thoroughly enjoy themselves. And we try to encourage them also that they shouldn't become old before they are old. Okay, there's a lot that can be done out there, and services are needed out there. Some of our elders are in our prayer group. They pray very actively, pray very well. Some play games still here and there. We take them to wherever we're going. An elderly lady followed me to Israel about 2-3 years ago, climbed mountains, jumped buses and everything. And everybody really looked after her. So it's important because the only thing a man does is to grow old. And we'll all grow old and sooner than later, because life really is very short. Anybody who's lived above 70 would know that it went like a dream. One minute you are young, the next minute they are saying ma and pa and grandpa and this and that, and you're wondering who are you people talking to? But there you go. That's life. It's past. It's gone very quickly. So society, environment, church in particular, must be there for everyone. Pray, get them praying and get people to know God. You know, one of our pastors said that the older he grew, I believe he said, the more he began to ask questions. Who am I? What am I doing here? Where am I going from here? Reflecting on life. How do I make the best of the rest of the hours, minutes, and seconds that the owner of life has permitted me? And these are questions that Christianity, the Bible, a good relationship with God will give you answers to as you study the lives of others that have gone before you. And that's very, very important, that you have a spiritual crutch to lean on as you get on in life and to help with answering life's various questions that only God can answer.
Thank you. Final question. What contributions do you think older people can make? I'm not talking spiritually now, I'm just talking generally. What contributions do you think they can make to the community?
What contributions can they not make? You know, my mother used to say that what an elder sees sitting down, a young man cannot see jumping on the tree. Elders have seen it all. You know, this pandemic that we're talking about, for instance, in 1918, there's probably 1 or 2 or 3 people still alive who remember how it went. There is such a repository of knowledge. If you want to talk about the history of Nigeria, I have some elderly people that I go and sit in front of them, bring out a nice cup of coffee or tea, and he begins to talk 1953, 1945, 1938, 1960, and so on and so forth. And it's such a collection. We're even putting together a program, a TV program, that allows elderly people to reflect on life and give a word for Nigeria and Africa, and tell us what it was like, what went wrong, how they see it, and what advice they're leaving behind. We call it legacy because we believe everybody must leave a legacy behind. So we need the elders. We need to consult them. We need to ask them for advice. We need to seek for their direction. We need to get them involved in the things that we're doing. It's a big regret for anybody to ignore that. Donald Duke suddenly discovered a lady who used to be Tafawa Balewa's secretary or Sardauna Sokoto's secretary. Can you imagine that amount of resource and knowledge the lady would have to give to people of my generation? So it's important. We like people to really, really be part of what we're doing in Nigeria.
Thank you very much. Before I go into question and answer period, I just want to quickly ask Mr. Russell. Mr. Russell is actually from the Afro-Caribbean community. Could you just quickly tell us, what do you think, as an older person, can bring within the community? How have you been making contributions to your local community? Mr. Russell. All right, thank you.
I think that we all have a part to play when we reach also a certain age, from you know, from early ages to you know, to being older in life. And actually, what I just heard from the pastor, my goodness, we all can take that as a very, very good example of life going forward. I remember meeting people in my life who said, church is for people who are old. Or when I'm young, I don't really want to go to no church. I can save that for later. Well, I have news for them, really, because you probably won't even live to be a certain age. And then what? Because I think the physical life is important, but the spiritual life is just as important, if not even more important. And that is why we should never underestimate life itself, the spiritual life itself, because everything revolves around spirituality. Even politics in different ways. The way the Ten Commandments became so important for the whole world. The Ten Commandments which Moses got in the Old Testament. It is one of the anchors of the justice system of many countries in the world today. So, and talking about looking after your elders, that is also a great legacy for every young person, every person today, man, woman, child. You know, it's so important that we heed those particular warnings from those people. And if we could only try to understand what the elders are saying to us. And I mean, especially Africa. Me, I'm actually from the Caribbean, but I know that my spirituality and my ancestors are African. As far as I'm concerned, I am an African, born in the diaspora, but would love to. I definitely connect with mainland Africa in every way possible. And in fact, I think even deeper than that, going deeper, thinking about when the Sahara Desert was fertile some 10,000 years ago, and we had African leaders in Egypt, for instance, and also that life itself started in Africa, and this black and white thing, just forget it, because it was always one people on the planet. And this thing about division is absolute nonsense. The people who became white, they came from Africa. They were actually Africans. And when they went north to withstand maybe the snow and ice conditions, their pigmentation changed. And that is also a part of history. But that's going a bit too deep, maybe, right here. So all I can say, in conclusion is, I am so glad to have been able to hear the different aspects of life in this broadcast. And I can thank you all for, bringing your individual offerings to the table so that all the world could hear and see to a certain extent what is on offer here. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that, Mr. Russell. Very much appreciated. Let me quickly go into the questions that have been put in the chat box here. The first one, I think probably Dr. Pam or Dr. Osiobu will be able to take this question. Why do some people live in denial of aging, such as people who say 40 is the new 20 and refuse to be described as aging, even when chronologically they are progressing in age? Is it social? Is it biological or psychological? Do you want to take that, Dr. Pam?
Yes, thank you very much. I think it is perhaps all of those that you have mentioned:
Right.
social, biological, psychological. You might even want to add financial. And if I take it from the back, perhaps that is a bit facetious, but we do know that in certain parts of the world, Nigeria is no exception. There are very hard rules about retirement, for instance, or progression. You hit a certain age, you are retired without question. So that is one consideration. But I think for the large part, it is socio-psychological, I would say, because of a degree of stigma as well.
Right.
Because if you're, by the very nature, aging means losing the resilience and robustness of biological ability in many ways. If it's a man, it goes to the core, i.e. they're less virile. If it's a woman, it is talking about less femininity, perhaps loss of reproductive ability, loss of attractiveness. And so there's so many things rolled into it. But on the other hand, you would find that there is also in many cultures the deference you've mentioned to the older person, the respect. And so you will see within the same cultural milieu, as it were, people who cherish getting older. So it is almost comical, I think, for some of us who go back and see schoolmates in their 50s wielding walking sticks and walking in rather exaggerated ways and demanding certain preferential treatment because of their age. So it's not something that can be defined, one size fits all. But I think how people approach age is a factor of the environment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next, I think this one is combination of question and comment. And this is to the pastor, not to answer, but hopefully you will be able to contact the relevant authorities. The statement goes, with the good works of giving elderly people a space, can the church share this idea to the government so this can be a service for older persons in Nigeria, that all states have this service funded by the government, not just the church. The church leaders can start the idea. And when I say the church leaders, I also mean the mosques or the Islamic leaders can start, or any other faith can start the idea so that all the faith organizations, especially the big ones, can provide similar services for the elderly, so that we know that the elderly are taken, or the older persons, I need to correct myself, are taken care of by all. And another question here is, how can the government encourage the very special skills of our doctors outside of the country to come home and set up services for the elderly and education for all Nigerians to know the different types of illnesses that some older persons can have and not think they are witches? I think it's all to do with education. A lot of education is needed, especially in areas not quite learned. Government has a lot of convincing to do and not put obstacles in front of the doctors so they can be motivated to come and build Nigeria. Do you agree with that, Dr. Pam? Yes or no?
Yes, I agree very much so. I would like to say, and thank you for that question, in response to Mrs. Ajayi Lyset's comment that professionals abroad, Nigerians in the diaspora, should come home. I would like to say to her, in my class of 86 from University of Benin, at least the majority of us have always looked towards coming back to Nigeria. But like many facets of life, where developing countries are concerned, you don't want to return and be part of the problem. You will want to be part of the solution. Now, we have Dr. Shoyemi here, who mentioned his great efforts to return to Nigeria, which in fact he did, but he also referred to the unpredictability of our home countries. So there are obstacles, and we wish to work with our brethren back home in such a way that we can come back and function, and also help to create a health environment that will work for our people. Because remember also that the majority of us, the majority of our families still reside in Nigeria, and we still see their suffering.
All right. Thank you. Do we have any questions? Excuse me. So that, because we're about rounding up right now, and we have a poll at the end of this discussion, which I would appreciate if everybody could complete. Do we have any question, or if anybody's raising up their hands, I just need to flip through the screens to find out whether we have any further questions. No one seems to be using emoticon to raise up their hands. Okay. Oh, okay. We have a Dr. Patricia Aku Mabo. What's your question, please? What's your question? I've actually unmuted you. We cannot hear you. We cannot hear you. Okay. Dr. Patricia, you've been unmuted. Do you want to ask your question? Hello? Okay, can you type? Yes. Okay, there is also another Femi here who has a question. Mr. Ifaturoti, what's your question, please? Can you unmute yourself and ask the question?
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. I can see my friend, brother, and pastor here on the screen. It's so nice to see you, and it was a pleasure, having you bless our little abode here in Maryland the other day. We look forward to your visiting again when next you're in the United States. My question will be directed to Dr. Ishaku. Now, with the COVID-19 thing, as you all know, the demographics that are coming out and the personal experience that we are going through here reveals that quite a staggering percentage of persons of color, are the victims. They're either dead or they are seriously, they are in critical condition. And then, so I consider myself, vulnerable in the sense, not just in the sense of age. I'm 64 years this year, also because I have underlying conditions. So as a result, I actually obey all those safety protocols. I try as much as possible to obey everything, which is I stay at home. I don't have to go anywhere unless only my Tuesday outings, where I go to neighborhood CVS to purchase, sanitary disinfectants and all the rest of it. And then from there, I go to the grocery, my wife, and then we come back home. What I heard Dr. Ishaka Pam saying is that even the grocery run and the he called it supply run, but I include, the pharmacy run as well. That even that as activity for persons like me. And that is coming at the heels of my recent experience when I realized that, I've just been told, I never knew anything about melanin. All I know is that at some point in time, my daughter told me about 4 years ago that I was vitamin D deficient. So he prescribed vitamin D for me, but after a while, I stopped using it. Now comes this new revelation that actually Blacks, because of something called melanin, also form into into some high risk category, which of course shows that it's not just age that is the cause of vulnerability now. It's a question of once you're Black, whether you are old or young, you are bound to be vitamin D deficient. And so and he also says something about exercises. Yes, I have a treadmill in my basement, but sometimes because of this vitamin D thing, I choose to go out there and soak in the sun so that I can get natural vitamin D. What I heard Dr. Ishaku saying is that even exercise needs to be done inside, indoors. So therein lies my confusion and my dilemma. Dr. Ishaka, can you just shed a light on this so that I can be better informed? Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Femi, for a very interesting question that is perplexing, I think, the medical world. You have touched on quite a number of things, and I'll just try and condense them into perhaps one unified whole. Now, bear in mind, I think in one of my questions, I said or in my earlier comments at the beginning, that the African in the Western world is actually different from the African in Africa. Let's take the issue of vitamin D. The reason why we have a surplus of melanin relative to our Caucasian brethren, if you like, is because of the sunlight in where our ancestors resided in Africa to protect us against ultraviolet light rays. Now, that protection, on the one hand, gives us the benefit of not suffering from ultraviolet related disorders. So skin cancers like melanoma are less common in Black people. Now, when you talk about vitamin D, there are a number of sources of vitamin D. You have dietary sources, and you have the conversion of the precursors of vitamin D in the kidney by the effect of sunlight. So when an African resides in a temperate climate, the dual or the double whammy, to use Mrs. Ajayi Lycett's phrase, is that not only are you not exposed sufficiently to sunlight, but also you have melanin, which stops what sunlight you're getting from really having the effect it should have on the kidneys and converting the precursor of vitamin D to the active vitamin D. Therefore, you have a degree of vitamin D deficiency. And so what is the role of vitamin D deficiency? I mean, the direct ones that we know of quite clearly is that if people are deficient of vitamin D, they have problems with their bones. That's why people get, the osteomalacia and rickets. However, its role in other conditions is not so well described. And so it's difficult to say, but it is one of those putative reasons that have been put forward for the predisposition of Afro-Caribbean Black people to the risks of COVID. So when we say, so on the one hand, you should go out, but on the other hand, you don't want to expose yourself to the risk of transmission of COVID infection. So with everything in medicine, it's a balance of risks. If you have a large garden and sun is streaming in there, by all means go out. But if going out means that you are going to mix with people to the extent where social distancing is not going to be possible, then you have to then put back the potential benefits of vitamin D against the risk of actually having COVID transmission. So that's about vitamin D. Now, why else would Blacks be more vulnerable to COVID infection? It's not in my belief. I mean, the jury is still out, and it will take a while before all the studies are in. But if you look at the mortality of COVID infections amongst Blacks in the Western world as against Blacks in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, you will see that we are not getting that geometric expansion of COVID infections like they had in China or that they had in Italy. If that was the case, then actually we would be seeing people dying in the streets in Lagos or in Kano. We've had people dying, but it has not reached that exponential phase. So there is something within Africa, within sub-Saharan Africa, that is protective. And those factors are not operative in the temperate world. Now, some of these factors that have been put forward are the BCG vaccination, that is the TB vaccination that children get in childhood in Africa, almost as a rule. These are vaccinations that are no longer employed in the Western world. In fact, for my children, we had to insist on vaccination. But if you look at, that is one vaccination that is thought to protect against respiratory infections. That is one thing. Second thing is the endemic nature of malaria in the tropics. Because if you look at the map of areas where malaria is endemic and you compare it to the map of the world where COVID-19 is not so dangerous, then you will find that those maps are identical. So is there something about the protection or the endemicity of malaria, the protection against malaria, or how endemic malaria is that is protective for Black people? We don't know. Now, these are a couple of factors. Now, the final point I want to make actually is the socio-demographic element. And if you look at the social classes and employment of Black people around the world, and when I say Black people this time, with respect to COVID, I'm talking about Black, Asian, and minority ethnic groups, because actually the mortality from COVID is higher in those groups, not just Black Africans. And what you find is that the majority of those people are frontline workers. There are also people who live in dense inner city areas. There are people who live in multi-generational households. So it's ideal situation to contract a highly contagious infection such as COVID. I'll give you an example. In my hospital here, there are 5 consultants looking after the COVID wards. And guess where they're from? 3 of us from Africa, 2 from Southeast Asia. So if doctors are going to die in my hospital, who will die first? So you find that by, even without putting in any other extraneous reasons, let us not go into racism or anything like that, Caucasians will, by virtue of being indigenous, will have started their education and their training and so on and so forth. They would have chosen or been accepted for the specialties of their choice that would actually take them away from the front line. So you find that the frontline workers tend to be of the ethnic minority group, of the immigrant group, and therefore, if you have a contagious infection, then the frontline troops are likely to be the ones to get it first. The doctors, the nurses, the cleaners, the bus drivers, the taxi drivers, those are the ones who will get it first. And if there are adverse effects of it, they'll be the ones who will suffer the complications. So I will stop there.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pam. That was quite insightful. I'm just going to take 2 more questions, and please just go direct to the question, and whoever is responding, just make sure that you answer in a very succinct manner. Thank you so much for that. I think Mrs. Coker had a question because she had been raising up her hand for a long time. Is she still with us?
Yes, I wanted to say.
Just a quick question there, please.
Hi, Fumi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello?
We can hear you.
Yes.
The question,
yeah.
please.
Before we round up, I just want to make a mention of this. You know, when we spoke, you mentioned about the care, the homes for the elderly,
yes.
for the aged.
Yes.
In Nigeria, we call it the old people's home.
Yes.
And with the mindset of Africans, especially Nigerians, what did I think? I want to make a point there. It will be a tough thing for Nigerians to go along with that because our tradition will frown at it. I'm so happy that Pastor Itwa mentioned a lot about looking after the elderly and the groups and that kind of thing. All I want to say is that it's a tough thing for Nigerians to accept. It's like putting your elderly in an open casket and just waiting to nail down the lid. Rather than that, I want to appeal to the government and to private institutions to develop training of home care, what do you call them? The home care people who will come to the home to look after the elderly. When the elderly is being looked after in the midst of the family, they do better than having to go and put them away like you're tired of them.
Right.
That's all I want to appeal. If there's a way we can reach the government and the private people, let's train home carers. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Mrs. Coker. I'm sure some of the doctors here will probably disagree a little bit with you because it depends on the state of the person's health. At times, you do have to actually take the older person into a care facility. Do you agree with me on that, Dr. Osiogbu? Dr. Osiogbu, I thought maybe you were back with us just now.
Yes,
yes.
I must apologize for that breaking transmission. Absolutely right. So there are those who really need to be in a facility where you have skilled and trained personnel to take care of them. Those at the end of the spectrum of dementia. Yes, sometimes you have family members who can afford, because the other issue is the home health nursing care services are not cheap.
Right.
So, you know, you need to have people who actually can afford it. But it can be quite agonizing for family members to see their mother or father become a shadow of themselves. So sometimes just keeping them in a facility takes that psychological burden away from them. Sometimes it could only just be for respite. So get them in for a week or two, just for the family to get a break, and then you can get them back into the home again. So we really, it has to be individualized. It's not a size fits all. You need to check for the needs of this particular individual based on the multi-complex issues they might have, and marry that with what facilities or what capacity is available in the home to actually take care of those needs.
Thank you very much for that. I think Deomi Balogun has a question. Please go direct to the question. Would appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you very much. Probably this question is for any of the doctors in the house. It's how to manage this vitamin D, which I think Dr. Pam spoke about not too long ago. The units that we can give our elderly, considering what we can advise them, considering the medications they are on already. Does one size fit all, like the 1000 IU, or should we just get more expert help to advise us on this? And also, as our last mother just was saying, which we have to change this, our African mindset about home, putting our parents in care homes. Just like doctors have said, one size does not fit all. And for the government, it is the government we have to appeal to have put more resource into having care homes that will help to maintain and to care for these our elderly. Once we change that mindset that we are not dumping them, but making life easy and making sure that we have a concentrated place for this our elderly to be looked after and looked after properly, then we are onto a winner. Thank you very much, the organizers. If I can have that question answered, I'll really appreciate it. Thank you.
You've answered your own question. Do you want to briefly, Dr. Pam, answer that? Could you get it? Because I felt she asked the question and answered it. But is there any contribution you want to make to that? Or maybe Dr. Osiobu, whoever.
Okay. Yeah, I'm happy to go with the question. Thank you very much. I think in a public forum, it's perhaps a little bit unwise to give doses of medications. The patient or the individual is best advised to see their doctor. But I would just like to say this, that the doses of vitamin D are actually dependent on how much vitamin D the individual has. So the dose for prevention of vitamin D deficiency is different from the dose for the treatment of vitamin D deficiency. In the latter case, you do need intensive doses for up to 6 weeks and then stepping down to a lower dose. There are blood tests that actually measure how much vitamin D there is in the blood and can guide the dose of vitamin D. However, what we can all do as individuals of whatever age group is to make sure that we eat a balanced diet. And with respect to calcium and vitamin D, because the two go hand in hand, the importance of the vitamin D is linked with calcium. So be sure to have dairy products and cheese in particular. Those are elements of the diet that have a good amount of calcium. Thank you. Dr. Osiobu might have something else to add.
Dr. Osiobu, do you have anything to add to what Dr. Palmer said?
No, actually, he said it all. Your replacement depends on your level. Right. And the physician really should be the one guiding what a particular client or individual would need if they were to need vitamin D replacement.
Thank you very much for that. The last question here is, and this is to to Pastor Itua. Brief question, brief answer. Is there a relationship between ageism and spirituality? Does spirituality enhance life?
Please repeat that question, please.
Okay. Is there any relationship between ageism and spirituality?
Ageism.
Yeah.
Aging and spirituality.
Yeah.
Technically, there should not be. Everybody is a spiritual being having a physical experience. And what we should try to do is to aspire to our spirituality as early as we can. The challenge, though, is that when people are young and strong and mobile and able to do things, they tend to think that they are in full control of their lives and they can live life the way they want. But the older you grow and the more you see that you have not been able to successfully control your own life, the more you begin to aspire towards a superior being who can help you. And especially when you know that the end is near. So you need to now wonder to yourself, where are you going to end up? So people begin to connect a bit more when they get a bit older. And really, they really shouldn't be. They really shouldn't be.
I know that for a fact that the septuagenarians we have here, they are still going to be with us for a very, very long time. So on that note, I would ask Chief Oluedo, one sentence. What do you want to leave with us? A lasting remark? Just for this discussion program, might I add. Is he still with us? Dr. Shoyemi, a lasting remark? Just one sentence, please.
Can you
Yes, we
hear
can.
me?
Yes, just one sentence that you want to
Yes,
leave.
the last remark is that growing old is an inevitable thing. And if I could just say that in 1967, I think it was, Rowe and Kahn described 3 components of successful aging. Okay, we're all going to age, but successful aging, 3 components: freedom from disease and disability, high cognitive and physical functioning, social and productive engagement. And I think the last one we've all said is important, that old people, our elderly people, should not be locked away, but they should be socially and productively engaged with the society.
Fantastic. What about you, Mrs. Coker, if you're still online with us? One sentence thereabout. Any lasting remark to give to us, an advice?
What I want to say is that good nutrition is primary health care. So everybody should make sure that during this maintenance age, you have the right nutrition to keep you healthy. Thank you.
Thank you. And is Chief Oluedo is he still with us? If it's not, I'm going to go back to Mrs. Ajayi Lysett. Somebody actually put in the chat box, could we have more of those quotations? I'm not sure whether you can still give us 1 or 2 more. Mrs. Ajayi Lysett, we can hear you. 1 or 2 more quotations. Emmanuel, can you unmute her then if she cannot unmute herself? Can you unmute her? Because we're trying to unmute you as well. Mrs. Lysett, we're trying to unmute you. For some reason, we cannot unmute you. Can you unmute yourself, please? Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now, Ma. Do you have any quotations that you can give to us, or a lasting remark? Just 1 sentence before we...
Since this is about aging, if the young are waiting till they get old before they discover their spirituality, I'm afraid it's a bit too late by then. As Pastor Itwa said, we're spiritual beings in a body, right?
Yes.
We're not our bodies, but we don't realize that. And there's a difference between spirituality and religiosity.
Right.
We tend to embrace religiosity. And when you are aging, so many things are uncertain.
Right.
The carpet seems to have been swiped from under your feet. So if you're not sure-footed to begin with, you're going to find it a very difficult ride. Because as Dr. Pam said, you're no longer as attractive as you would like to be. You're no longer as strong as you would be. Various things are going south. So if you're not strong and if you haven't prepared yourself, I'm afraid it's going to be old age will be a bumpy ride. And so we start ready. It's not when we start getting old that we find the doorstep to the churches. Because if you're not living a spiritual life, if you're not in touch with who you really are before, I'm afraid it's not easy. That's when you start worrying about whether you are attractive. And then that's when you're running around for the tummy tuck. And God knows what else. All the relevancies of life, you start chasing these stupid things. That means you don't really know who you are. And it's too late. When you're doing that, when you are aging, means you haven't prepared yourself for the journey. You must welcome every threshold that you reach. There's a time, as the Bible said, forgive me, Pastor Itwa, there's a time for everything. Yes, Ecclesiastes tells us. So we must adhere to that and know that there's a time for us to get young and be vital and everything. And there is a time when our senses and our strengths are waning. So we must accept and do what we can. We will die. There's no need to be fearful of death. People want to go to heaven, but they don't want to die. Well, that won't work. We are going to die and we must face the inevitable.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Lycett. So basically, we should just embrace aging. It is beautiful to be in the world. We should just embrace it. So on that note, I'll say a very big thank you to all the panelists, Dr. Pam, Dr. Osiogbu, Mrs. Koka, Chief Dr. Olu Edo, Dr. Kule Shoyemi, and finally, alas, Mrs. Ajayi Lycett. I shouldn't forget all the participants as